The emergency dispatch crackled through Officer Martinez's radio at 3:47 a.m. Domestic disturbance. Possible assault, 1247 Maple Grove Lane. What should have been a routine noise complaint about a backyard pool party turned into something far more sinister when the homeowner's trembling finger pointed to a hidden camera tucked beneath the pool house eaves. The grainy footage revealed not splashing teenagers or loud music, but a desperate woman in a torn dress, running barefoot across wet concrete, her screams swallowed by the night. Behind her, a shadow moved with predatory intent. The time stamp showed 11:23 p.m., nearly 5 hours before the call came in. As Martinez watched the screen, his blood ran cold. This wasn't about a pool dispute at all. Someone, the blue and red lights, painted the quiet suburban street in harsh alternating colors as Officer Danny Martinez pulled up to 1247 Maple Grove Lane. It was the kind of neighborhood where the biggest crime was usually someone forgetting to bring their trash bins in on time-white picket fences, manicured lawns, and the lingering scent of barbecue smoke from weekend gatherings. At 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, the street should have been dead silent. Instead, Martinez could hear shouting coming from behind the two-story colonial house with its perfectly maintained garden and cheerful yellow shutters. The dispatch had been vague. Pool dispute between neighbors, possible noise violation, standard stuff. He'd handled dozens of these calls, usually drunk college kids or adults who forgot they weren't 20 anymore. Martinez adjusted his body camera and walked up the brick pathway, noting the motion sensor lights that flickered on as he approached the front door. She wore a silk robe that she clutched tightly around herself, and her hands were shaking. "Thank God you're here," she whispered, glancing nervously over her shoulder toward the backyard. "I'm Rebecca Hartwell. I called about the the situation." Martinez studied her face. The woman looked genuinely frightened, not just annoyed like most noise complainants. "Mrs. Hartwell, I'm Officer Martinez. Can you tell me what's happening?" "It's my neighbor," Rebecca said, stepping aside to let him in. "David Chen. He lives next door." She pointed through the living room window, toward the house to the right. There's been screaming coming from his backyard pool area. Terrible screaming. A woman's voice. Martinez followed her gaze to the neighboring property. The Chen house was dark, except for a single light glowing in what appeared to be a converted pool house in the backyard. "How long has this been going on?" "On and off, for hours," Rebecca said, wrapping her arms around herself. "It started around 11:30. I thought maybe they were just having a party, but then I heard ... double quotes." She trailed off, her voice catching. "What did you hear exactly?" "A woman screaming for help, and then it would stop for a while, and then start again. Different voices sometimes. I couldn't just ignore it anymore." Martinez nodded, making notes. "Have you spoken to Mr. Chen about this before? Any previous incidents?" Rebecca's expression darkened. "David's lived there for about 2 years. He keeps to himself mostly, but there have been strange things, women coming and going at all hours. Cars parked in his driveway that leave before dawn, and the pool house he renovated it last year, spent months working on it himself, wouldn't let any contractors inside." "Did you call anyone else about this?" "Family Services, non-emergency line." "I called the police 3 times in the past 6 months about suspicious activity, but nothing came of it. Tonight was different. The screaming was so..." She shuddered, so desperate. Martinez looked through the window again. The Chen property was quiet now, but something felt off. In his 8 years on the force, he'd developed a sixth sense for when a routine call was about to become anything but routine. "Mrs. Hartwell, I'm going to need you to stay inside while I check this out. Can you show me the best way to access the backyard?" Rebecca led him to the kitchen, where a sliding door opened onto a deck overlooking both yards. The properties were separated by a 6-foot privacy fence, but Martinez could see over it from the elevated deck. The Chen backyard featured an elaborate in-ground pool with a matching pool house that looked more like a small apartment. Landscape lighting created pools of warm light across the patio, but the pool house windows were covered with blackout curtains. "That's where the sounds were coming from," Rebecca said, pointing to the pool house. "I can see it from my bedroom window upstairs. There were shadows moving around inside for hours." Martinez stepped onto the deck and listened. The night was completely still. No voices, no splashing, no signs of life. But the silence felt heavy, loaded with tension. "Mrs. Hartwell, I want you to lock the door behind me and stay inside. If you see or hear anything unusual, call 911 immediately." He walked around to the front of the Chen house and rang the doorbell. The sound echoed through the interior, but there was no response. He rang again, waited, then knocked firmly on the door. "Police, Mr. Chen, I need to speak with you." Still nothing. Martinez walked around the side of the house, using his flashlight to check the windows. Most were dark, but he could see that the sliding door to the backyard was slightly ajar. His instincts prickled. The backyard was immaculate, expensive outdoor furniture arranged around the pool, a built-in barbecue station, and professional landscaping. But as Martinez approached the pool house, he noticed something that made him pause. The concrete around the pool was wet, but not from swimming. There were irregular puddles and what looked like drag marks leading from the pool to the house. The pool house door was unlocked. Martinez drew his weapon and called out again, "Police, anyone inside needs to come out now." Silence. He pushed the door open and stepped inside, immediately hit by a strange smell, cleaning chemicals mixed with something else, something organic and unpleasant. The pool house had been converted into a studio apartment with a kitchenette, a bathroom, and a sitting area. But it was the far corner that made Martinez's blood run cold. A chair sat in the center of the space, surrounded by bright photography lights. Restraints hung from the arms and legs of the chair. A camera on a tripod was pointed directly at it, and scattered around the floor were women's clothing torn and discarded. "Jesus Christ," Martinez whispered into his radio. "Dispatch. I need backup at 1247 Maple Grove Lane. Immediately, possible kidnapping scene." He began to systematically search the space, his heart pounding. In the bathroom, he found more evidence: bloodstains in the shower that someone had tried to clean, fresh towels stacked on the counter, a trash bag in the corner that he didn't want to open without backup. As he waited for additional units, Martinez noticed something else. A small security camera mounted in the corner of the room, its red recording light blinking steadily. His eyes followed the wire to a laptop computer sitting on the kitchenette counter. The screen was open to a security monitoring program showing feeds from multiple cameras around the property. Martinez clicked through the different camera angles: pool area, front yard, driveway, and interior of the pool house. But it was the timestamp that made his stomach drop. The recordings went back months. Martinez clicked on the most recent footage and watched the screen with growing horror. The timestamp showed 11:23 p.m., exactly when Rebecca had said the screaming started. The camera had captured everything. A woman in a torn dress ran barefoot across the pool deck, her face twisted in terror. Behind her, a man emerged from the pool. House David Chen, Martinez realized, moving with calculated precision. The woman slipped on the wet concrete and fell hard, her scream clearly audible through the camera's audio. What happened next would haunt Martinez for years. Chen approached the fallen woman slowly, almost casually. He said something to Hertha. Audio was clear enough to hear his calm, measured voice. "You know you can't run from this, Sarah. We talked about this." The woman Sarah tried to crawl away, but Chen grabbed her ankle and began dragging her back toward the pool house. Her screams echoed across the quiet neighborhood, but in that moment, Martinez realized something that made his blood freeze. The timestamp showed this had happened nearly 5 hours ago. Rebecca had called at 3:47 a.m., but the assault had occurred at 11:23 p.m. Where was Sarah now? Martinez clicked forward through the footage, his hands shaking. At 11:47 p.m., Chen emerged from the pool house alone. He spent 20 minutes cleaning the pool deck with a hose, washing away the evidence. At 12:15 a.m., he carried what appeared to be a large canvas bag from the pool house to his car. At 12:23 a.m., David Chen drove away. Martinez grabbed his radio. "Dispatch, suspect is not on scene. I repeat, David Chen is not on the property. I need an APB on." He paused, realizing he didn't have the license plate number. "I need detective units here now. We have a crime scene with video evidence of an assault and possible kidnapping." As he waited for backup, Martinez continued watching the security footage. There were dozens of files organized by date, going back months. Each file had a woman's name as the title: Sarah, Jennifer, Maria, Ashley, Rebecca Martinez. Single quotes as blood turned to ice. The last file was labeled Rebecca Phase 1 and was dated 3 days ago. Detective Sarah Chen, no relation to David, arrived at the scene at 5:23 a.m. to find a chaos that would define her career. The pool house looked like a war zone 2 Bodie's, blood covering most of the floor, and Rebecca Hartwell sitting in a corner wrapped in a blanket, staring at nothing. "What do we have?" Sarah asked Sergeant Murphy, who had been first on scene after the patrol units. "Hell if I know," Murphy replied, shaking his head. "We've got Officer Danny Martinez, 8, veteran, shot in the head. We've got David Chen, homeowner, stabbed in the neck with a pen. And we've got Rebecca Hartwell, neighbor, claims she killed Chen in self-defense after he murdered Martinez." Sarah looked around the room, taking in the photography equipment. The restraints, the computer setup. This isn't a simple domestic dispute. No kidding. The woman's been talking nonstop since we arrived. Says Chen was some kind of serial killer, that he had files on multiple victims, that he was planning to kill her and make it look like suicide. Has anyone checked her story? We secured the computer, but we haven't accessed it yet. Waiting for the tech team, but Detective Murphy lowered his voice. The woman's been making reports about Chen for months. Multiple calls to dispatch, complaints to the Homeowners Association, reports of suspicious activity. The responding officers all noted that she seemed increasingly paranoid. Sarah studied Rebecca, who was now talking to a paramedic. "What's your gut telling you, honestly?" I think she finally snapped. Martinez responds to what he thinks is a noise complaint, walks into whatever this is, and gets caught in the crossfire. Wrong place, wrong time, and Chen. Maybe he was up to something hinky, maybe he wasn't. But this setup, Murphy gestured around the room. This could be staged. Photography equipment doesn't make someone a killer. Sarah nodded, but felt uneasy. She'd been working homicide for 12 years, and something about this scene felt off. The positioning of the bodies, the elaborate setup, the timing yet, all felt too convenient. "Murphy, I want you to canvass the neighborhood. Talk to everyone. Within a 3-block radius, find out what they know about Chen, about the victim, about any previous incidents. You got it." Sarah approached Rebecca, who looked up with hollow eyes. "Mrs. Hartwell, I'm Detective Chen. I need to ask you some questions about what happened here." "Detective Chen?" Rebecca's voice was hoarse. "Are you related to David Chen?" "No, ma'am. Just an unfortunate coincidence. Can you tell me what happened tonight?" Rebecca launched into a detailed account of the night's events. She spoke clearly, methodically, providing specific times, exact quotes, and vivid descriptions of Chen's actions. It was either the most detailed truth Sarah had ever heard, or the most elaborate lie. "Mrs. Hartwell, you're saying that Mr. Chen had been planning this for months? That he had files on multiple victims?" "Yes, Sarah, Jennifer, Maria, Ashley. He showed me photos, played audio recordings. He said he'd been disposing of their bodies, covering up their disappearances. And Officer Martinez," Rebecca's voice broke. "Danny tried to save me. Chen had his wife Alana kidnapped. He was forcing Danny to cooperate. But in the end, Danny chose to end it, rather than let Chen win." Sarah made notes, but remained skeptical. "Mrs. Hartwell, I need to be direct with you. You've made multiple reports about Mr. Chen over the past 6 months. Each time, responding officers found no evidence of wrongdoing. Some of the reports contained ... inconsistencies. He was manipulating the situation. He was deliberately doing things to make me call the police so he could study my behavior, my patterns. It was all part of his plan." "What kind of things?" "Playing recordings of women screaming, just loud enough for me to hear. Having strange cars in his driveway at odd hours. Lights in the pool house at all hours of the night. He was creating the very situations I was reporting." Sarah reviewed her notes. "Mrs. Hartwell, why would he do that?" "Because he was a predator. He used women's civic responsibility against them. He made them call the police, made them the primary witnesses to their own disappearances. It was the perfect cover. That's a very sophisticated plan for a suburban homeowner. Check his computer. Check the files. You'll see." Sarah left Rebecca with a victim advocate and joined the forensics team examining Chen's computer. "What they found made her blood run cold. The files were exactly as Rebecca had described. detailed surveillance photos, audio recordings, video footage of multiple women. The files went back over 2 years and covered not just the current neighborhood, but 3 previous locations where Chen had lived. Jesus Christ, muttered tech specialist Williams. This guy was running a full intelligence operation. What about the security footage from tonight? That's where it gets interesting. The footage has been heavily edited. We can see the original files and the modified versions. Someone spent a lot of time creating a false narrative. Sarah reviewed the original footage and felt sick. Assault on Martinez, his psychological torture of both the officer and Rebecca. His detailed confession to multiple murders. It was all there, unedited and undeniable. Williams, I need you to recover every deleted file on this system. I want to know everything about Chen's operations, his methods, his victims. Already on it, detective, but there's something else you should see. Williams pulled up a file labeled Training Manual. It contained detailed instructions for surveillance, psychological manipulation, victim selection, and body disposal. But most disturbing were the final chapters, which outlined how to recruit and train associates. This wasn't a one-man operation, Sarah realized. Chen was building a network. Gets worse. Look at this. Williams showed her a series of encrypted communications between Chen and someone identified only as student. The messages discussed Rebecca's case specifically, referring to it as a teaching opportunity. The student was supposed to take over after Chen eliminated Rebecca, Williams explained. There are detailed instructions for how to continue the operation, how to expand it to other neighborhoods. Sarah felt a chill. Is there any way to identify this student? We're working on it. The encryption is sophisticated, but we might be able to trace the communications back to their source. Sarah returned to the scene where the coroner was. Examining Martinez's body, what can you tell me, Doc? Officer Martinez was shot at close range with his own weapon. Powder burns on his temple indicate he pulled the trigger himself. This was suicide, not murder, any defensive wounds. Signs of struggle, some bruising on his wrists, consistent with restraints, but no defensive wounds. If Mrs. Hart's story is accurate, he chose to end his own life rather than comply with Chen's demands. Sarah looked at Martinez's body and felt a wave of sadness. He had been a good cop, a family man, someone who tried to do the right thing, and that goodness had been weaponized against him. Detective Chen, a uniformed officer, approached. We found something in Chen's house. Sarah followed the officer to the main house, where they had discovered a hidden room behind a false wall in the basement. The room contained detailed files on dozens of women, surveillance equipment, and what appeared to be personal items taken from victims. Holy shit, Sarah whispered. How many victims are we talking about? Based on the files, at least 12 women over the past 3 years. But the officer pointed to a wall covered with photos. These aren't all victims. Some of these are marked as potentials or future projects. Sarah examined the photos. They showed women from multiple neighborhoods, all going about their daily lives, unaware they were being watched and evaluated. At the center of the wall was a large map showing Chen's movements over the past 5 years, different cities, different neighborhoods, a clear pattern of relocation after each series of murders. This is a serial killer who had perfected his methods, Sarah said, and according to the computer files, he was training someone else to do the same thing. Sarah's phone buzzed. It was Williams from the tech team. Detective, you need to get back here. We've identified the student. Sarah rushed back to the pool house, where Williams was staring at his computer screen in shock. We traced the IP address from the encrypted communications. The student has been operating from a location about 40 miles from here. Where Millbrook, it's a suburb similar to this one. Same demographics, same type of neighborhood. Sarah felt her stomach drop. Are you telling me there's someone else out there right now using Chen's methods? It's worse than that. According to the communications, the student was supposed to activate tonight. Chen's death was supposed to be the signal to begin anew. Operation? What kind of operation? Williams pulled up a series of messages between Chen and the student. They call it expansion phase. The student has been preparing for months to implement Chen's system in Millbrook. He's already identified targets, established surveillance, begun the psychological manipulation process. Sarah grabbed her phone and called her lieutenant. Lieutenant, I need backup units dispatched to Millbrook immediately. We have an active serial killer operating there. Slow down, Chen. What are you talking about? David Chen wasn't working alone. He had a partner, a student. The partner is supposed to begin killing tonight. Based on what evidence? Sarah looked around the pool house at Martinez's body, at the evidence of Chen's crimes, at Rebecca. Dr. Michael Harrison sat in his pristine home office in Millbrook, watching 3 monitors simultaneously. The left screen showed surveillance footage from cameras positioned throughout the Brookfield neighborhood, the same system his mentor, David Chen, had perfected. The center screen displayed encrypted communications that had gone silent 12 minutes ago. The right screen showed a live feed from Jennifer Walsh's backyard, where she was taking out her garbage at exactly 11:47 p.m., just as she had every Tuesday for the past 6 months. Michael had been studying Jennifer for 8 months. Ever since Chen had selected her as the perfect first subject for the Millbrook expansion, she was ideal, recently divorced, living alone, naturally observant, and possessed of an almost compulsive sense of civic duty. She had already called the police twice about suspicious activity at Michael's rental house 3 blocks away, just as Chen had predicted she would. Tonight was supposed to be graduation night. Chen had promised to walk Michael through his first complete operation, providing real-time guidance as Michael implemented everything he had learned over the past 2 years of training. But Chen's communications had gone dark, and Michael was beginning to suspect something had gone wrong. Target is in position, awaiting final authorization. No response. He tried again. Mentor, please confirm. All systems ready for Phase 1 initiation. Still nothing. Michael leaned back in his chair, considering his options. Chen had been very specific about protocol: never proceed without confirmation, never deviate from the established timeline, never take unnecessary risks. But Chen had also trained him to be adaptable, to think independently, to recognize when circumstances required flexibility. Michael opened another application and accessed the local police scanner. If something had happened to Chen, there would be chatter about it. What he heard made his blood run cold. Multiple units responding to 1247 Maple Grove Lane. Officer down ... Suspect deceased. Requesting detective units and forensics ... Maple Grove Lane. June's address. Michael quickly switched to news feeds and social media, searching for any information about the incident. Initial reports were sketchy, but the pattern was clear. There had been a confrontation at Chen's house. People were dead, and police were treating it as a crime scene. His mentor was gone. Michael felt a mixture of grief and excitement. Grief for the loss of the man who had opened his eyes to the beauty of systematic predation. Excitement at the realization that he was now free to implement his own vision of Chen's work. Chen had always been cautious, methodical, focused on perfection, over innovation, but Michael had ideas for improvement, for expansion, for taking the system to its logical conclusion. With Chen gone, those ideas could finally be explored. Michael returned to his surveillance monitors and smiled. Jennifer Walsh was back inside her house, probably settling in for the night. She had no idea that she was about to become the foundation of something revolutionary. Unlike Chen, who had limited himself to individual victims, Michael envisioned something larger. Why target one woman at a time when you could target entire communities? Why operate in isolation when you could create a network of operators? Why hide your work when you could document it, study it, and use it to recruit others? Michael opened a file labeled Millbrook Project Phase 1 and began reviewing his preparations. Unlike Chen's improvisational approach, Michael had spent months creating a systematic plan that would eliminate variables and maximize efficiency. Phase 1 involved 5 women in the Brookfield neighborhood, each selected for specific characteristics and carefully manipulated into establishing behavioral patterns that would facilitate their eventual capture. Jennifer Walsh was the primary target, but Michael had also been preparing backup subjects in case the primary operation encountered complications. Phase 2 would expand to include the entire Millbrook area, dozens of potential victims, each one prepared and processed according to the refined methods Michael had developed. The police would be overwhelmed, the community would be terrorized, and Michael would have created a case study in systematic predation that would attract followers from across the country. Phase 3 was the most ambitious training camps where Michael could teach his methods to dozens of students simultaneously. creating a network of operators who could implement the system in cities across the nation. But first, he had to prove that the system worked without Chen's guidance. Michael checked his watch, 11:52 p.m., according to his timeline. Jennifer would be settling into her evening routine, checking locks, setting her alarm system, taking her sleep medication. In exactly 37 minutes, she would receive the first phone call. Michael had been calling Jennifer's landline at random intervals for the past 3 months, always hanging up when she answered. The calls were designed to create a baseline of anxiety, a sense that something was wrong but nothing definite enough to report to authorities. Tonight's call would be different. Tonight, Jennifer would hear breathing, then whispered threats, then silence. She would call the police, just as Chen had predicted. And when they found no evidence of a break-in, no sign of forced entry, no physical threats, they would file a report and leave. Jennifer would be left feeling frustrated, vulnerable, and increasingly isolated. Over the following weeks, the calls would escalate. Jennifer would receive messages on her answering machine, find her garbage cans moved, discover her garden disturbed. Each incident would be carefully calculated to increase her paranoia while remaining below the threshold of actionable police intervention. Finally, when Jennifer's psychological state had been sufficiently destabilized, Michael would make direct contact. He would appear at her door claiming to be a concerned neighbor who had noticed suspicious activity around her house. He would offer to help, to keep watch, to provide security. Jennifer, desperate for assistance and validation, would trust him, and then the real work would begin. Michael's phone buzzed with an encrypted message from an unknown sender. "Student, this is emergency contact beta. Mentor is compromised. Abort current operations immediately." Michael stared at the message. Emergency contact beta was supposed to be Chen's backup handler, someone who would make contact only in the event of Chen's death or capture. But Michael had never been given any information about Beta's identity or authority. He typed back, "Identity verification required." The response came immediately. Verification Protocol 7. The system exists beyond any individual. The work continues regardless of personnel changes. You have been activated for independent operations. Michael smiled. Verification Protocol 7 was something only Chen could have shared with a trusted associate. Emergency contact beta was legitimate. He replied, "Understood. Beginning Phase 1 operations immediately. Negative. You are to cease all Millbrook activities and relocate to Seattle. Target list and operational parameters will be provided upon arrival." Michael's smile faded. He had spent 2 years preparing for the Millbrook operation. He had studied the targets, established surveillance, created the perfect conditions for success, and now some unknown handler was telling him to abandon everything and start over in a new city. Request clarification. Millbrook preparations are complete. Targets are ready for harvest. Student, you will follow instructions without question. Millbrook is compromised. Law enforcement may have accessed Mentor's files. You are to destroy all evidence and relocate immediately. Michael considered this. If law enforcement had indeed accessed Chen's computers, they might have discovered communications referencing the Millbrook operation. But they couldn't possibly have identified Michael's location or methods. He had been careful to compartmentalize his activities, to operate through multiple layers of encryption and misdirection. Besides, Michael had no intention of abandoning. 2 years of work to start over in Seattle under the supervision of some unknown handler. He had learned everything Chen could teach him. It was time to become his own master. Michael typed, "Understood. Beginning relocation procedures now." Then he immediately deleted the messaging application and destroyed his communications equipment. Emergency contact beta, whoever they were, would assume Michael was following orders. By the time they realized he had gone rogue, the Millbrook operation would be complete, and Michael would have established his credentials as an independent operator. Michael returned to his surveillance monitors and began final preparations for Jennifer Walsh's first contact. At exactly 12:29 a.m., he dialed her number. The phone rang 4 times before Jennifer's sleepy voice answered. "Hello," Michael breathed heavily into the receiver, creating a sense of menace, without saying anything that could be traced back to him. "Hello, who is this?" More breathing than a whispered, "I can see you, Jennifer." The line went dead. Michael watched through his surveillance camera as lights came on throughout Jennifer's house. She moved from room to room, checking windows and doors. She spent several minutes looking out her front window, scanning the street for any sign of surveillance. At 12:47 a.m., Jennifer called the police. 911, what's your emergency? I just received a threatening phone call. Someone said they could see me. I think someone might be watching my house. Ma'am, are you in a meeting? FBI Special Agent Marcus Webb arrived at the Millbrook Police Station at 6:47 a.m. with a team of 12 federal agents and a mandate from Washington to treat the Chen investigation as a matter of national security. Sarah had worked with federal agents before, but never on anything this scale or this urgent. Detective Chen Webb said, extending his hand, "I've read your preliminary report. Impressive work stopping Harrison before he could claim his first victim." "Thank you, Agent Webb. But I'm afraid Harrison was right about one thing. We're dealing with something much larger than a few rogue operators." Webb nodded grimly. Phoenix, Portland, and Tampa all reported incidents last night. 3 more attempted kidnappings, all following the Chen methodology. 2 were successful. Sarah felt sick. Amanda Rodriguez in Phoenix, Lisa Thompson in Tampa. Both women had been making reports about suspicious activity in their neighborhoods for months. Both received threatening phone calls between midnight and 1 a.m. Both disappeared from their homes between 2 and 3 a.m. "What about Portland?" Marie Sullivan fought back, managed to stab her attacker with a kitchen knife before neighbors heard the screaming and called police. "She's alive, but the perpetrator escaped." Webb opened a laptop and showed Sarah a map of the United States with red dots marking known incidents. "Based on our preliminary analysis, we believe the network has been operating for at least 5 years. We've identified potential sites in 17 states. 17 states. Anywhere there are suburban communities with the right demographic profile, middle-class neighborhoods, recent development, residents who are civic-minded but not overly suspicious of their neighbors." Sarah studied the map. The pattern was clear. The network had been systematically infiltrating communities across the country, establishing operations, claiming victims, and moving on before local authorities could connect the dots. How many victims are we talking about? We don't know yet. Harrison's questioning has been ... difficult. He's clearly been trained in counter-interrogation techniques. But based on the computer files we've recovered from other sites, we estimate somewhere between 50 and 80 women over the past 5 years. It gets worse. We've identified at least 12 active operators currently in the field. The network has been recruiting aggressively, targeting men with specific psychological profiles, providing extensive training, and deploying them to establish new territories. What kind of psychological profiles? Webb pulled up another file. Intelligent but narcissistic. Socially adept but fundamentally antisocial. Technically skilled but underemployed. Men who feel entitled to power over others but lack legitimate means to achieve it. How are they recruiting these people? Online forums, social media groups, dark web communities. They identify potential candidates and gradually introduce them to the ideology and methodology. It's a sophisticated operation, with professional-level psychological manipulation. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from the station's front desk. "Harrison's lawyer is here." "Already?" Sarah looked at her watch. "We arrested him less than 8 hours ago." Webb frowned. What kind of lawyer shows up at 7 a.m. for a suspected serial killer? Sarah and Webb went to the interrogation room, where they found Michael. Harrison sitting across from a woman in an expensive suit who looked like she'd stepped out of a corporate boardroom. "I'm Catherine Moore, Mr. Harrison's attorney," the woman said, standing to shake hands. "I understand my client has been arrested on some rather serious charges." "Your client attempted to kidnap Jennifer Walsh," Sarah said. "We caught him breaking into her house with restraints and chemical agents. According to the arrest report, my client was found inside Ms. Walsh's residence, but there's no evidence he intended to harm anyone. Mr. Harrison is a doctoral student in sociology at Northwestern University. He was conducting research on residential security systems." Sarah stared at the lawyer. "Research?" "Mr. Harrison's dissertation focuses on suburban vulnerability to home invasion. With Ms. Walsh's permission, he was testing her security measures. To identify potential weaknesses, we have him on surveillance video stalking her for months. You have him documenting behavioral patterns as part of his academic research. Everything Mr. Harrison did was part of a legitimate scholarly investigation into community safety. Webb stepped forward. Ms. Moore, your client was carrying restraints and sedatives, research materials for his study of criminal methodology. Mr. Harrison is writing about how predators operate so that communities can better protect themselves. Sarah felt her frustration growing. This is ridiculous. We have evidence. What you have, Catherine Moore interrupted, is a graduate student conducting field research who was arrested based on assumptions and speculation. Unless you can provide concrete evidence of criminal intent, my client should be released immediately. Webb pulled Sarah aside. She's good, very good. The kind of attorney who costs serious money. You think the network sent her? I think someone with resources and connections made sure Harrison had legal representation before he could tell us anything useful. They returned to the interrogation table where Catherine Moore was reviewing documents with Harrison. Mr. Harrison, Sarah said, let's talk about David Chen. I don't know anyone by that name, Harrison replied. We have your communications with him. Encrypted messages, referring to training, targets, operational procedures. I've never sent any encrypted messages. I don't know what you're talking about. Webb leaned forward. Michael, we know Chen was training you. We know about the network. We know about the other operators. If you cooperate with us, we can protect you. Protect me from what? I'm a graduate student who is researching community safety. I don't need protection. Catherine Moore stood up. Detective Agent Webb, unless you have additional evidence to present. I'm advising my client to exercise his right to remain silent. Sarah watched Harrison's face as his lawyer spoke. For just a moment, she saw something flicker in his eyes: fear, uncertainty, maybe regret. But then the mask slipped back into place. Actually, Harrison said, I do want to say something. Catherine Moore looked surprised. Michael, I advise. It's okay, Catherine. I want to help the police understand what they're dealing with. Harrison turned to face Sarah and Webb directly. You're right that there's a network. You're right that David Chen was part of it. You're right that there are operators in multiple cities, Michael, his lawyer warned. But you're wrong about almost everything else. You think you've disrupted something. You think you've saved people. You think you're winning. Webb leaned forward. What are we wrong about? You're treating this like a criminal enterprise, like something you can investigate and prosecute and shut down. For decades, suburban communities have created the illusion of safety through social cooperation. Neighbors looking out for neighbors, citizens reporting suspicious activity, everyone working together to maintain order. But that system has a fatal flaw, which is, it assumes that the people you're cooperating with share your values. It assumes that civic responsibility is mutual. It assumes that everyone wants the same things you want. Harrison smiled. But what happens when someone with different values infiltrates that system? What happens when someone uses civic responsibility as a weapon? What happens when the very mechanisms designed to protect communities become tools for destroying them? Sarah felt a chill. You're talking about weaponizing social trust. Exactly. David Chen understood that suburban communities are perfectly designed. Hunting preserves. The victims select themselves through their own civic behavior. They create their own surveillance networks through neighborhood watch programs. They establish their own communication systems through social media and community forums. And you exploit those systems. We improve them. We make them more efficient. We demonstrate their true potential. Webb stood up. You're talking about mass murder as a form of social commentary. I'm talking about revealing the fundamental vulnerability that underlies modern suburban life. Every community that thinks it's safe, every neighborhood that prides itself on cooperation, every group of citizens who believe they can protect themselves through civic engagement, they're all just collections of potential victims who have organized themselves for easier harvesting. Catherine Moore was frantically taking notes, clearly realizing that her client was confessing to crimes that went far beyond what he'd been charged with. Michael, she said urgently, I strongly advise you to stop talking. Why? They already know most of it, and they can't stop what's coming anyway. Sarah leaned forward. What's coming? Phase 3. David and I were just the beta test. The real operation begins now. What real operation? Simultaneous activation. Cities over 200 operators, each targeting multiple victims. a coordinated demonstration that will process approximately 500 women in a single 72-hour period. Webb grabbed his phone. When tomorrow night, Friday the 13th, the network has a sense of humor, we'll stop it. Harrison laughed. How? You don't know who the operators are. You don't know where they're located. You don't know who their targets are, and even if why. At 11:47 p.m. on Friday the 13th, exactly 24 hours after Catherine Moore's ultimatum, Detective Sarah Chen sat in a makeshift command center at FBI headquarters in Chicago, surrounded by screens showing 47 cities across America. Each screen displayed a map with red dots marking potential target locations, based on the pattern analysis Rebecca Hartwell had helped them develop. The past day had been a masterclass in federal coordination under impossible circumstances. Agent Webb had assembled a task force of agents whose backgrounds had been thoroughly vetted, while Sarah worked with local departments to identify officers who could be trusted with the most sensitive aspects of the operation. Status report, Webb called out to the room. Phoenix team reports all surveillance positions active, came the first response. Portland team, ready. Tampa standing by. One by one, the reports came in from cities across the country. In each location, carefully selected law enforcement teams were monitoring neighborhoods where the pattern analysis indicated network operations were most likely to occur. But Sarah knew they were still operating with incomplete information. Despite Rebecca's memories and the fragments of data they'd recovered from Chen's computers, they still didn't know the exact identities of most targets or operators. Detective Chen Webb said, approaching her workstation, "Any word from your informant?" Sarah's informant was Alina Martinez, Officer Danny Martinez's widow. After learning about her husband's death and the circumstances surrounding it, Alina had volunteered to help with the investigation. Her nursing background gave her access to medical records and personnel databases that had helped identify several potential network members. Elena's been monitoring emergency services communications across the target cities, Sarah replied. So far, everything looks normal. Too normal. That's what worries me. If the network is really planning to process 500 victims tonight, there should be some indication of preparation. Unusual equipment purchases, suspicious vehicle rentals, abnormal communication patterns, but everything's quiet. Webb frowned. You think they've changed their timeline or their methodology? Catherine Moore made it clear that the network is adaptable. Maybe they realized we were on to Phase 3 and shifted to something else. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check your personal email. A friend. Sarah hesitated, then opened her laptop and accessed her personal Gmail account. There was a new message from an encrypted address with an attachment labeled Gift. The attachment was a video file. Sarah plugged in headphones and played the file. The video showed Catherine Moore sitting in what appeared to be a luxury hotel room, speaking directly to the camera. Detective Chen, I hope you're watching this from your command center at FBI headquarters. Yes, we know where you are. We know what you're planning. We know about your surveillance teams in 47 cities. Sarah felt her blood run cold. You've been operating under the assumption that tonight is about Phase 3, a coordinated attack on 500 women. But Phase 3 was never about the victims, Detective Chen. Phase 3 was about you. The camera pulled back to reveal that Moore was not alone in the hotel room. Behind her sat 12 people, 6 men and 6 women, all looking directly at the camera with the same calm, predatory expression Sarah had seen on David Chen's face. Allow me to introduce the regional coordinators, Moore continued. Each of these individuals manages operations across multiple states. Each has been responsible for training and deploying dozens of operators over the past 5 years, and each has been eagerly awaiting the opportunity to test their methods against organized law enforcement response. One of the men leaned forward. Detective Chen, tonight you've deployed your best agents to 47 cities. You've coordinated with local law enforcement. You've established surveillance networks and communication protocols. You've done everything right. But, added one of the women, you've also concentrated your resources in exactly the locations we wanted you to concentrate them. You've isolated your most competent personnel from their normal support structures. You've created the perfect conditions for what we actually have planned. Sarah's hands began to shake as she realized what they were telling her. Phase 3 was never about attacking suburban communities, Moore said. Phase 3 is about eliminating the law enforcement personnel who pose the greatest threat to our operations. Tonight, Detective Chen, we're hunting the hunters. The video continued with each regional coordinator explaining their role in the night's operations. They had identified the agents and officers working on the Chen investigation. They had mapped their locations, studied their tactics, and prepared coordinated attacks designed to eliminate the task force that had been assembled to stop them. You see, Detective Chen Moore concluded, the network has always understood that our greatest vulnerability was discovery by competent law enforcement. So we developed a protocol for dealing with that vulnerability. We call it enforcement neutralization. Sarah ripped off her headphones and shouted across the command center, "Webb, we need to evacuate everyone now." "What are you talking about?" Phase 3 isn't about attacking civilians. It's about attacking us. They're targeting the task force. Webb stared at her. "That's impossible. How could they know our locations?" Sarah's laptop chimed with another message. This one contained detailed floor plans of the FBI building they were in, complete with the locations of every agent and officer currently in the command center. "They know everything," Sarah whispered. At that moment, the lights went out. Emergency lighting activated, bathing the command center in red. Agent Webb immediately activated his radio, but got only static in response. "Communications are jammed," he announced. "All units implement Protocol 7 immediately." Protocol 7 was the emergency evacuation procedure for federal facilities under attack. But as agents began moving toward the exits, Sarah heard something that made her freeze. The sound of multiple vehicles surrounding the building. Through the windows, Sarah could see black SUVs positioned at every exit. The occupants were already moving toward the building with military precision. "Webb," Sarah said, "they're not just targeting this facility, they're hitting all 47 cities simultaneously." Webb tried his radio again, switching to different frequencies. Finally, he got a response from Phoenix. "Phoenix team under attack." The voice was strained, barely audible through static. Multiple shooters coordinated assault. Agents down the transmission cut to static. Webb switched to Portland. Portland. Team, report status. "Ambushed at surveillance position, need immediate backup static." Tampa, casualties requesting emergency static. City after city, the reports were the same. The network had simultaneously attacked law enforcement teams across the country, targeting the very people who had been trying to stop them. "How many people are we talking about?" Sarah asked. Webb was pale. "Over 300 federal agents and local officers. The entire task force." Sarah realized the true scope of what David Chen had initiated with his backyard pool dispute. It had never been about one serial killer or even one network of killers. It had been about systematically eliminating the law enforcement capabilities that could threaten organized predatory behavior. "Sarah," Webb said quietly, "we need to assume that most of our people are either dead or captured. We're on our own." Through the windows, Sarah could see the assault teams taking positions around the building. They moved with professional military coordination, suggesting extensive training and preparation. "How long do we have?" Sarah asked. "Maybe 10 minutes. Before they breached the building, maybe less." Sarah looked around the command center at the remaining agents and officers, maybe 20 people total. Most of them support staff rather than field operatives. "Webb, what about Elena Martinez?" "She's not here." "You think she's safe?" "I think she's our only hope. She's the one person with access to the information we need who's not on their target list." Sarah quickly composed a text message to Elena. "Network attacking all task force locations. Need immediate help? Trust no official communications. Chen investigation files in my car, get them to media immediately." As she hit send, the building's main doors exploded inward. Moved with ruthless efficiency, using non-lethal weapons to incapacitate rather than kill. They wanted the law enforcement personnel alive. Sarah realized, probably for the same kind of psychological processing David Chen had perfected. "Everyone down," Webb shouted. But it was too late. Within 3 minutes, the entire command center was secured. Sarah found herself zip-tied to a chair, watching as Catherine Moore walked calmly into the room. "Detective Chen, Agent Webb. Ladies and gentlemen of the task force," Moore said pleasantly. "Welcome to the real Phase 3. Moore walked to the bank of monitors that had been showing the 47 cities. One by one, she switched the displays to show live feeds from various locations across the country. Each screen showed captured law enforcement personnel, BI agents, detectives, patrol officers, federal marshals, all restrained in rooms that looked disturbingly similar to David Chen's pool house. Over the past 5 years, Moore explained, the network has identified and cataloged every law enforcement officer, federal agent, prosecutor, and judge who poses a potential threat to our operation.